Good evening. Hello. And I am Ellis Dean, your host from blackdoctor.org. I want to thank you for joining us for this important conversation as we prepare our children to head back to school in the coming weeks. We are here tonight with another panel in partnership with Cedars-Sinai as we discuss everything from COVID-19 vaccines to youth mental health, including important tips for helping our kids build resilience and coping skills. Tonight's discussion is also available via simultaneous interpretation in Spanish on our Daily Vitamina Facebook page. We're talking about youth mental health because it's important. According to the U.S. Surgeon General, the COVID pandemic further exposed the nation's youth mental health crisis, citing an alarming number of young people who struggle with feelings of helplessness, depression, and unfortunately, thoughts of suicide. Those of us who are parents, teachers, and caregivers know that over the past 3 years, our children have faced something nothing of us ever faced in our childhoods, a global pandemic that moved school online and kept them isolated from their friends, not to mention them navigating fears around school shootings and racial unrest. But there is some good news. The good news is we have an expert panel here to help us help our kids stay healthy and well. So let's meet them. So we have Dr. Sabrina Renteria, and she is a pediatric psychiatrist at Cedars-Sinai. And we also have Dr. Priya Soni. She is a pediatric infectious disease specialist at Cedars-Sinai, who will give us the latest updates on how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting our kids, as well as the nation's latest news about vaccines for kids ages 6 months and up. And later in the program, we have Suzanne Silverstein. Suzanne is the founder director and innovative Cedars-Sinai program to help children called Share and Care, which is in place in Los Angeles schools. We'll hear more about that program in just a bit. So we've got a lot to talk about this evening, so let's get started. Dr. Soni, we're going to start with you. Before we dive into our topic tonight, we want to start off with a question about monkeypox. And we know that's kind of growing here. We've got a few cities that have declared states of emergency, so including Los Angeles. So recently, the World Health Organization declared monkeypox a global health emergency. What should parents know about monkeypox, especially as children are heading back to school?
Thank you, Ellis, for the warm welcome and the very timely question about monkeypox. So I guess I'll start by adding to what you said that monkeypox is declared a global emergency at this point through the WHO. But today, our U.S. government has also deemed it a national healthcare emergency. And so I just want to tell the audience a little bit about monkeypox. So far, globally, there have been over 26,000 cases and counting. In the U.S. itself, there have been about 6,000 plus cases. So we make up a big portion of the global cases so far. Monkeypox is a virus that is super similar to smallpox, which we had previously eradicated. And monkeypox came to be in the late 50s when it was discovered in outbreaks related to monkeys used in research. But we know now that monkeypox is actually also transmitted through rodents and other avenues. With this current outbreak, it appears that a lot of the transmission we're seeing is occurring with men who have sex with men. But that's not the only way that someone can get monkeypox. And I want to make that very clear that though right now, a lot of the cases are coming from that mode of transmission. Anyone can get monkeypox. In fact, we've seen a lot of cases now starting to creep up in women as well as a handful of children here in the United States. And so monkeypox really can start with some lymph node swelling, fever, but that may or may not necessarily be there. But what's really characteristic is this rash that develops, and it kind of progresses through different stages as a patient gets sick. And these rashes, these lesions, can be very, very painful. And that's one of the major issues that we're dealing with in these patients that are being seen right now in the emergency department. It's the pain that they're experiencing through these lesions. We are still trying to figure out how big of a risk this is going to be for our children around the country. And so far, there have been about 4 reported cases related to children. But I'm assuming that number is going to be increasing as we move through the weeks and head into the school year. As more and more folks become more aware about this. We do know that children less than 8 years old are at higher risk of some of the complications with monkeypox. And any child who's immunocompromised, of course, they're at a higher risk as well. So this is something that we're really glad as infectious disease specialists, we now have that national heightened national emergency declared, and we can kind of move resources, including vaccines, to kind of help prevent our most vulnerable population. So something that we want you all as parents to be aware of and continue to keep an eye on as you start thinking of sending your kids back to school soon.
Well, thank you for that update. There's some things that all of us as parents, because I know my son's about to go back to school, and so I'm just, there's some concern as we see it, the numbers start to grow. Almost, it's a little deja vu, but I understand we are better prepared for this particular disease than we were for COVID-19. So just trust your primary care provider. Stay on top of the information as parents, and make sure. Hey, look, I was like, call Dr. Sony if you have any problems.
Call your pediatrician too, because they see a lot of rashes, and I gotta say, they're gonna know your child the best. One thing I will mention is, you can get this from contact. So it is reminding me of the early pandemic days, like you said, Ellis. But so far, what we know is that this is more of a virus that's transmitted through contact and not like those aerosolized droplets, like COVID. So that's an important feature to keep in mind. And yeah, we're gonna be, we're gonna continue to keep an eye on this and make sure everyone's up to date with how this is impacting our children in the future.
Well, we're happy that you're there on the front line, making sure that all of us, including our children, are safe. So now that we're talking about, or we got the monkeypox out of the way, so now let's talk about, can you give us an update on where we are? We know you're a pediatric infectious disease specialist, which is really, really specialized. And so that's why we're excited to have you here. So can you give us an update on where we are with COVID, and particularly as our kids are preparing to go back to school?
Absolutely. I know a lot of us are sick of hearing about COVID at this point, now 3 years into this, and it's still circulating. That's the fact of it. We're still dealing with COVID and subvariants of our ancestral strain of COVID that we first had with the pandemic. Currently, we're seeing BA.5. It's a subvariant that's circulating throughout the country. We are seeing upticks in cases. Full disclosure, I recently had it and have recovered, so I'm really happy about that. But, it's inevitable. After 3 years, we're all going to be faced with this virus again and again. And I think it's really important for parents to wrap their heads around that. We're going to be dealing with COVID for years to come. And what we know and what we've been kind of encouraging this whole time as healthcare providers is that the vaccine remains the best form of protection. And the really good news this summer, I was happy to see that the FDA had approved the vaccine in the younger kids, now 6 months and above. All of these kids can now be fully protected before they head back into the school year. These vaccines are safe and they are effective, and they're adjusted. Their doses are adjusted for the younger kids. So I think parents should really keep that in mind and remember that as they're making these important decisions to keep their kids safe. I will share that as of I think July 27th, there have been over 800,000 doses given in that 6-month to 4-year-old range.
Okay.
And things have been going smoothly with no major safety signals that have come up. So that's super encouraging. And then in the older kids, 5 through 11, there have been over 10 million doses given. So that is huge. I think it's taking some parents some time to kind of come to terms with it, but a lot of parents I know are really happy that they're able to provide this protection for their kids, especially because the CDC, in looking through the data, they have now kind of understood the impact of this disease in kids. And COVID is now a number 4 and 5 top cause of death in children in these age groups, especially the young kids and even the older, the 5 through 11-year-olds. So it's no longer something that we initially felt was just going to be a disease of the adults. Our kids are getting hospitalized, and many are unfortunately passing away due to this terrible virus. So getting your kids vaccinated is super, super, super important. And I encourage all of the parents to do that and discuss any concerns they have with their pediatricians.
Well, that was my next question. Is like, what, for those parents on the fence, what are, 1 or 2 things that you would tell them if they were coming to see you, that you would tell a parent that's on the fence about getting their child vaccinated? What are those couple of things that you would tell them to help nudge them to making a decision to get their child vaccinated?
Sure. I think one of the most important things parents should know is that this is unlike any other virus we've really had to deal with before, in that it's so unpredictable. I've seen healthy kids get terrible lung infections because of this virus. I've seen complications after the virus is over, and kids are coming into clinic to see me because of long haul symptoms or long COVID with difficulty concentrating, difficulty in school, just excessive fatigue. And so there's not just one way that this virus is impacting our children. There's many different ways it is, and it's an unpredictable sort of thing, even if you're healthy. So keep that in mind,
Yeah. So parents, I know it's a difficult decision and it's the health and safety of your child, but really, we have to not just think about what could happen to them from the vaccines. We have to think about what could happen to them if they catch COVID, and that there's enough evidence that suggests that there's more problems, complications that come from your child catching COVID than getting vaccinated. So just some FYI there. So, Dr. Renteria, you've been so patient. Thank you for hanging there with us. It was some great information. So I opened today's panel by saying that our kids are in uncharted territory. I remember growing up, I never had to deal with the pandemic. Like I grew up in Florida, so most we had to deal with was hurricanes, and not downplaying hurricanes because they're serious, but there's not a global pandemic. So from online schools to missing out on milestones, I can personally, my daughter was a senior in 2020 in high school, and she missed her prom. She missed graduation. We celebrated her graduation on our couch, and as I watched a video clip of all the seniors that were graduating. But now, they're having to learn a new normal, to return to socializing and gathering. How is this manifesting in our children? Like all of this change, not being able to have a set routine. Are you seeing an increase in mental health concerns in young people?
Hi, thank you, Ellis. Unfortunately, we are. So even before the pandemic started, um, mental health challenges were the leading cause of disability and poor life outcomes in children and teens. Unfortunately, after the pandemic, because many children lost a loved one or they were isolated, they weren't able to go see their friends at school, maybe their parents lost a job, and they had housing or food insecurity, the percentages of depression and anxiety actually doubled. So recently, they did a global survey, and about 1 in 4 youth are thought to be experiencing clinically elevated depression, and 1 in 5 youth are experiencing clinically elevated anxiety symptoms. So it definitely had its impact.
Absolutely. So, I'm thinking for both of you, how do we empower our kids? What I'm saying? Like, how do we empower our kids to move forward past the pandemic, past some of the other societal challenges that we're facing today, that are unique to this time period, right? That are unique to this generation of kids. How do we empower them to move beyond that, to be, encourage some resilience? Either one. That's for either one of you.
Well, luckily, children are very resilient. So that's the benefit. Children bounce back. Um, I think one of the main things that you want to encourage is just having a healthy routine. Um, so having a structure, making sure that kids are going to bed at a certain time at night, setting limits on screen time, and making sure that you still are planning fun things in the future. So kids know that even though there's pandemics going on, you're still planning their birthday party, you're still planning vacations, and trying to encourage them to socialize in a safe way.
Right. Right. Dr. Sonia, you want to add anything to that, or you're just going to
Yeah,
co-sign?
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think the resilience of the kids is really why a lot of us go into pediatrics. They do bounce back so quickly. It's not like adults sometimes when these setbacks happen. They're super resilient, and we see that time and time again as they're getting through infections and all sorts of things. But yeah, I think setting that routine is super helpful, right? Because a lot of them had such disruptions in school early on as we were figuring out how to best handle the pandemic. And then they kind of had some of these mental health issues pop up when they had so much time at home without that structure. So getting that back and kind of implementing those things that really bring them joy. I totally echo what Dr. Andrea was saying. So absolutely.
Yeah, and if I could add my little 3 cents here, I think that in some of the new ways that we interact, it's about how we approach it, right? So if we approach it from a positive standpoint, helping our children and giving them ways to process, then that will help ease some of the anxiety that they've been experiencing as a result of all of this change. So, like if you make putting a mask on as a fun game instead of not something that's terrible, hard to do, then they'll be okay with it. But if we are, complaining about it, then we can transfer some of that energy to our children. So we're real cognizant of that. So, Dr. Renteria, from the pressures of social media to the concerns around racial unrest and school shootings, young people today navigate many concerns that can cause a tremendous amount of anxiety. How can parents, teachers, and caregivers help them in a healthy way?
So I think that the increased rates of depression and anxiety, it's been studied and it's been shown to be connected to exposure to social media and screen time. And I think it's really, really important for parents, our caregivers, to limit exposure to news stories that are constantly, replaying the same narrative. It's meant to be sensationalized and scary, and I think kids watching that over and over again can really be anxiety provoking. So limiting news and social media exposure is really essential. I think it's also really important that parents and caretakers talk to their kids about their concerns or worries and acknowledge their fears, but have this opportunity to have a two-way conversation. And in talking things out, I think you're going to really notice that your children will feel better about talking to you about what they're going through. And then you can help them navigate their fears. And then one other thing that has come up recently in the literature is trying to get outside and move. So getting moderate exercise, about 150 minutes a week, or vigorous exercise, about 75 minutes a week, has been shown to be protective against depression and anxiety. So in essentially just trying to be outside, get some exercise with your kids, or encouraging them to go outside and exercise is really going to be beneficial to their mental health.
So what should parents and caregivers look for in terms of behavior changes, right? So we're talking about they've got some pressure, we've got COVID, we've got racial, we've got all this stuff going on around them. And if it is impacting them, what are those things that we should be looking for that might indicate a child might be suffering from anxiety or depression or another mental health issue? Are the signs of stress different in kids versus adults?
Yes. Kids aren't going to always come out and tell you they feel depressed or anxious, and they might not even realize it. So they will express depression in irritability and grumpiness. They might even say often that they feel bored. And they will also have some changes in their sleep patterns. So maybe tell you that they had a hard time falling asleep, or you'll hear them, restless in the middle of the night or waking up early. And they might even have bodily complaints. So tummy aches, headaches, nausea, those can all be signs that your child is experiencing depression or anxiety.
Okay, so us concrete folks, we like to be real specific. So, is there something that's always a red flag that we should say, okay, that's a number one red flag, I've got to take my child in?
I would say some big things to look out for is when your child is isolating more than normal. So school avoidance, no longer wanting to go to school, and a drop in grades can be another sign. So even if they are going to school, but they're not able to concentrate or participate, and they start to get a huge change in their grades, that can be a big red flag. Not enjoying their previously enjoyed activities. So if somebody enjoyed playing, basketball often, and then all of a sudden they don't like basketball and they don't really want to do much, that can be a red flag. But the biggest one to look out for is if they ever express suicidal thoughts.
Okay. And speaking on that, what should parents do if their child does express to them that they're having some thoughts of harming themselves?
So I think the main thing would be getting them to a mental health professional or their pediatrician to get them screened to see if they are, safe to go home or be home, or if there's some next steps that the parent should take in order to get them treated.
Absolutely. So, that's some wonderful advice. Dr. Soni, should parents start with their child's pediatrician for advice when it comes to their child's mental health? And how might a pediatrician help a child with the mental health concern? Because their training is not specifically in mental health. So should they start with a mental health? Should they start with their pediatrician, or should they go directly to a mental health professional?
Great question. Yeah. So I always think of the pediatrician as like home base for your child, right? So they know your child since they were born. Most of the time they have had to kind of deal with the ups and downs in childhood, infections, or other issues that might have come up. So they really understand your child and your family dynamic. Most pediatricians do a really good job of kind of understanding the unsaid stressors of a family dynamic too. And so they're always a good place to start with these issues and when these issues arise. And so as Dr. Renteria was mentioning, they can start by doing a screening to kind of see if the child is kind of going through these sort of subtle findings of depression or anxiety. And then as your home base, they're going to be the ones to put out referrals to the specialists that can kind of take it from there and get your child the help they need. So I think it's always a great idea. You know, you're going to be going there for the checkups and everything like that anyway.
Right.
And your routine vaccinations, which you shouldn't miss and get behind on. But also think of them as a home base for some of these mental health concerns as well.
No, I like that idea. Your pediatrician is home base, and then they get you the first and second and wherever else you need to go. So use them as home base and then work your way out from there, because you have that probably have a stronger and longer relationship with your pediatrician. It's great advice. So Dr. Renteria, all right. So admittedly, so I'm a reformed social media kind of junkie. But I love that commercial that says TikTok taught me. But that notwithstanding, much has been said about screen time and social media as a factor in kids' declining mental health. So first question is it really a factor? And how can parents and caregivers help, especially when screens are now part of our kids' lives for schoolwork and much more?
Yeah. So unfortunately, it is linked to depression and anxiety in children and teens. The American Academy of Pediatrics has some pretty strict recommendations for children based off of their ages. So under the age of 2, they just recommend no screen time whatsoever. If a child is going to be on a screen, it really should just be for like a video visit with their family. Between the ages of 2 and 5, you really want to limit your child to at least under an hour of screen time, and it should be high quality programming. So, and then above the age of 5 into the teens, ideally it's under 2 hours of screen time. That is a huge challenge, especially when kids are using screens for online schooling or assignments. So really, there might be a little bit of wiggle room there. You just, as a parent, need to have some strict limits and try to stick to them. So even if, maybe one day your child, your teenager has been on their screen a little bit longer than normal, they have an extra assignment, you could have a little flexibility there, but you really want to also be careful about not having their screens, cell phones or computers in their room, and try to limit screen time before bedtime. So at least 30 to 60 minutes before bed, just have that screen turned off, help them asleep.
Well, I'm going to tell my folks that are watching, that's your phone. Okay. And so you can check it at any time. Okay. And you can shut it down at any time. Do not let a child try to tell you how to work your phone in your house. Okay. I'm sorry. I had to let the parents know you still get control in your household. All right. Handle that business, but I hear you in terms of limiting screen time for children. We all need to limit our screen time probably as much as possible, but definitely for our children, because it could be linked to many things as you alluded to. So, Dr. Soni, we're talking about kids, but how can we reduce stress for all of us? Because we know that if there is stress in the household, whether it's from a parent or from the child, we all are impacted. It's kind of becomes this group shared kind of social anxiety kind of situation that goes on. So how can we reduce stress for everyone in the household so we can continue to navigate successfully in an ever-changing world?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my response is going to be some of the things we talked about, right? What's good for the child is actually good for all of us, and it's the family dynamic can be tricky, and there's always um, unexpected stressors that come up. And I think one of the key things is just being able to talk about it, talk about what's going on, talk about if there is a family event that's sort of causing a burden or strain. Um, have that conversation at dinner. Create a habit of kind of bringing up the issues to the forefront, and instead of just sweeping feelings and issues under the rug. I think it's always good to talk about it, even with the kids. So and kind of understand how they may be feeling through some of the stressors. Because, yeah, the pandemic's going on and all these things, but we all have our individual sort of issues and family events and things that may also be contributing to a child's sort of mental well-being. I've really encouraged mindfulness, and that's a really broad term, but for me, mindfulness comes in like just getting outside in nature. And that's my way that I practice mindfulness, because we're in the summer months, and I think we should all really take advantage of the healing powers of Mother Nature, and just kind of getting out there, even for a 10-15 minute walk, catching the sunset as a family. These little things really go a long way. And I think it's just so understated, the importance of how much they can positively impact our families. So yeah, and then of course all the other things, right? Like our stress levels are highly tied to also the nutrition we're getting and the quality of sleep that we're getting, and so really identifying any ways we can improve those is always a good thing to focus on.
So if you're just joining us, we're working and partnering about preparing your child for a healthy school year. And we are talking with Dr. Priya Soni and Dr. Sabrina Renteria from Cedars-Sinai Hospital. We've got some great advice. So if you're just joining us, I'm going to try to give a quick summary. Number one, stay in contact with your child pediatrician. Not only for their mental health, but also for questions about the COVID vaccine, getting them vaccinated. And there's a host, that's your home base for your child, is your child's pediatrician. Also, develop a good routine. Have a good routine with your child in terms of what's going on. We're going to limit some screen time on those devices, get them off. And then there's a sliding scale as they get older. They can do a little bit more, but always make sure you're regulating. Pay attention to your child's behavior. If their behaviors, if there's a dramatic shift in their behavior, then that might be a red flag that they are experiencing it, even though they may not verbalize it. They are experiencing some sort of emotional distress, and that you've got to step in and say, hey, that's a significant drop in grades, isolating behaviors, a loss of interest in activities, difficulty sleeping, among some of the symptoms that we discussed here tonight. With regards to COVID, the vaccines, if you still have some concerns, please go home base. Go check home base. Go to your pediatrician. Ask your questions that you need. The CDC has a wonderful site, and I know that there's a host of information on blackdoctor.org, as well as the Cedars-Sinai site. Say that 5 times real fast. The Cedars-Sinai site as well, that you can get all of the COVID information that you need. So I think that was a summary of what we've talked about in the first half, and now we're going to shift and bring on our final guest, and that is Miss Suzanne Silverstein. Hopefully we've got the auditory. So you're on mute right now, Suzanne. So let's take that off mute. And then
do you hear me? Yes. Oh, well, I can be a good example of anxiety in what you do. Behind the scenes, I have had Amy, and we have tried everything. So thank heavens.
Well, you look like a duck. You were calm on the top, and the feet were just working. So
we were going here.
Yeah. So I'm going to let's start and shift to a great program that you're part of. And this is doing a lot of community help for kids. The Cedars-Sinai Share and Share program has been providing services to at-risk children and adolescents in Los Angeles for over 40 years. Professional counselors provide services to students who are experiencing emotional and academic challenges due to traumatic situations and stressors. Sharing Care provides a group structure to facilitate emotional nurturing, healthy self-esteem, and positive coping skills through a 12-week art therapy curriculum that can result in academic success. As we mentioned, we have founding director Suzanne here with us tonight. Suzanne, tell us, are you seeing an increase in mental health concerns among the students you serve in LA?
Yes, but we're seeing it in terms of social skills. School after school talks about how the kids, when they have come back onto campus, are really having a hard time problem solving together and connecting. There are many more fights on campuses than we have ever really seen before. But in addition to working with the kids in terms of all the socialization, we do it through our program and our 12 weeks. We also work with parents and teachers because we believe it's important to get our arms around the entire school community. One of the ways we start all of our groups is with mindfulness, Dr. Soni. So I have one thing where I'm going to share that we do a lot. It's called Smell the Roses and Blow Out the Candles. And I'm going to give an example for our little kids, how you can have them smell the rose and blow out the candles. When the kids, as they get older, you can extend it. So you can have them smell the rose in like 2 counts, hold their breath for 3, and blow out in the count of 3. And we have them do it like about 3 or 4 times because that helps them start to feel a lot calmer. And very often we'll have them draw, how are you feeling now? And then at the end, how do they feel after this exercise?
I love that. I love that part. Smell the rose, blow out the candles. So we got the graphic up on the screen for everybody. So smell the rose, blow out the candle. That is fantastic. Pull that down. So I think I'm thinking about that when we're talking about smelling the rose and blowing out the candles. So Suzanne, there's a little bit of an echo. So I'm going to put mute while I'm asking, and then I'll take you off. There you go. Perfect. So we'll take you off mute when you're getting ready to answer. So your program is in LA. And tonight we have an audience that's been watching across the country. I saw some people from Utah and Virginia and other places. So what are some of the lessons that they can take from the success of your program?
You know, we have a great deal of resources that we have developed for our families throughout the years and through COVID. So that, for example, unfortunately, we've been faced with lots of tragedies, gun violence, horrific things happening. So we have a guide that helps parents learn how to talk to their children about these horrific topics and what are behaviors that they should look for. We also talk to them if their child has been teased or they're having a hard time with peers. We have a tool that allows them to look at how can they advise their child? How can they help their child try to create a better school environment for themselves? We have, Ellis, if you could share our website. On our website, it is filled, oh, there it is, it's at the bottom, thank you. It is filled with tons of resources for parents, also for teachers. In addition to the the resources, we have a lot of videos, and the videos talk and demonstrate all kinds of mindfulness techniques for kids, ways to have calming corners. If your child is more anxious, how you can help them with the anxiety. We have a whole array on how to help your child have a successful year. We have one for new parents who have never taken their child to school, and we want to set them up properly. We have one for elementary school children, and then we have one for kids transferring to middle school or high school, and there are videos that go with all of this.
Well, that also is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that and for those resources. And I'm going to put that link in our comment section, and that it'll be clickable. Don't click it just now, because we want you to stay here and finish watching this program. But after the program, we want you to click that link. And I went to that site. It is fantastic. You just go to the resource page, and there are a number of videos and documents that you can download, so you can kind of lean into this program, even though you're not in the LA area. And so hopefully we can spread it out to other cities and get it to other cities. But there are a host of resources on the site that you can lean into right now. So my next question for you, Suzanne, is really, can you give our parents some tips as we're getting close to this new school year? We're in August. I can't believe we're in August already. We're in August. Can you give our parents like 3 to 5 tips that they can help prepare their child for have a successful school year?
I would be happy to, Alice. The first, which you've heard from our other presenters, is routine. Routine is really important for kids. And for school, you want a morning routine and you want a night routine. You want to be sure your kids get enough sleep, they get enough rest. You want to talk to them ahead of time about the upcoming school year. For the real little ones, what is it going to be like? What can they expect? For the older ones, or even elementary school, transitioning to a new class with a new teacher, and what if they're not in with all of their friends? What is that going to be like? So the more you can discuss it, the more you're preparing them. And check in with them frequently. It's not one discussion. It might be many short discussions. You want to also validate their feelings. Their feelings are very important, and they're very real to them, even if you might disagree with them. So it's important to acknowledge what they're sharing. You want to encourage their special interests. We like kids to have interest after school. And for middle school and high school, clubs are really important. The more interest kids have, the more successful they will be. And as a parent, it is really important for you to get involved with your child's school. You want to know your child's teacher. You want to be an advocate for your child. If your child is struggling in some way, you want to go speak to the school, speak up, and help your child with whatever their needs might be. And on the website, there are all of these videos and resource guides that will address all of these issues. We also do monthly parent meetings. If you might be interested, you can be any place in the United States, and you are welcome on our parent meeting. These are virtual, and if you email, can you put up our email? Oh, there you go. If you email us your name and your email address, and what grade your child is in, we would love to have you join us. We're usually the first week of each month. Wednesday is English and Thursday is Spanish. And a lot of our tools are in Spanish as well as English. Thank you, Alice.
You're quite welcome. Yeah, so the email there is on screen, shareandcare@cshs.org. So make sure you send that email if you want to lean into the meetings and get some information about those meetings that they have each month. So that is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to speak to just. Okay, so I'm speaking here as a host, but I'm also a parent, right? So I have all of those same anxieties, right? So Suzanne, you're speaking my language when you're talking about, clubs and activities and leaning in. So this is for anybody that wants to jump in. But, so for example, like my son, he's got the PlayStation, right? And so he gets on the PlayStation, but he plays with his friends online. Is that a way to connect, or is that not, right? Because it's headset, there's no human interaction, but they are talking to each other, because I hear them yelling at each other playing the game from his room. So talk about that impact, because I know there's been a shift to more of that kind of activities because of pandemic and other fears. Is that something that I should discourage, encourage, and how do we kind of help calm some of the fears that parents are experiencing today? Suzanne?
Well, it's fine to play a limited amount like that. It cannot take place of being in person and learning how to connect with your peers. That is very important. You connect in person very differently than you do online. It's the same as text messages. How many times do you see kids sitting next to one another and it's like, oh, look, what are they doing? Well, they're talking to one another on their phones, but they're right next to one another, but they don't say a word. They might laugh if something is funny. And we know socialization has kind of gone downhill with COVID. So the more in person we can encourage, the more I would recommend.
Dr. Soni, Dr. Renneria, we want to add on to that?
I mean, I think Suzanne did a really great job at explaining that social interaction piece. And I do think that that's what has been part of the contribution of the increased rates of depression and anxiety in kids is that lack of social interaction and being so connected to their devices and separating themselves from their peers, thinking that they're connecting via social media or all these online video chats, but it's just not the same.
Right.
And so it really is important to try to remind them, like, the face-to-face contact and putting the phones away is just going to be really important for their mental health.
That brings me to my next question, and it's kind of attached to it. So I saw a comedian. I'm not going to say which comedian, but I saw a comedian, and he made a really wonderful point. And he was talking about what Suzanne was mentioning with regards to texting, and I'm going to talk about bullying, right? And so when you are not there face to face, it's easier to be a bully, right? Because I can just leave a bad message. And his point was, I can just put a bad comment, a nasty comment, and walk away, and I don't have to feel the emotion of your response. But when you're in person, if you say something mean to somebody in person, you get to see that response, and you might feel bad for that, and then that will assuage some of the bullying. Now, bullying behavior has increased. How do we teach our children, in the absence of a lot of interaction, in-person interaction, how do we teach our children to be empathetic of each other and not engage in that online bullying type behavior? Go ahead.
All right, I'll go back. Part of it is role modeling, and kids role model what they learn at home. And if we know that a lot of kids that are bullied have learned the behavior from parents. So parents need to be really conscious about how they are responding to the kids, to their spouses, their significant others, to other family members, because kids are going to say, well, if my parent does it, then it's okay for me to do it.
Yeah, I agree. There's studies for people who are have these more kind of tendencies towards bullying, and they didn't have caretakers that modeled this empathetic, loving environment, talking about feelings. Children mimic their parents. It actually is a part of their development. And so taking that one-on-one time, putting away your cell phone, having that face-to-face conversation at dinner time with your kids and talking to them about how they're feeling is going to go such a long way. It's very, very important to their development.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Soni, we've been talking, and I think we mentioned mindfulness earlier in the broadcast, but we've been hearing a lot about that mind-body connection. How do we as parents teach our kids to respect that mind-body connection and develop those habits, that mind-body connection, as they continue to get older and mature?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mind-body connection, like as Dr. Renteria and Suzanne were mentioning, comes from us as parents modeling that behavior first, right? And then kind of showing children that this is a great way to deal with feelings that are a bit overwhelming, and kind of work from there, And I think that's a great place to start. And I think, doing activities with them that kind of harness some of the healthy behaviors and habits are important. Doing group activities is really important. So one of the things that Cedars-Sinai has is some great online videos for healthy habit forming and teaching how to do recipes together, and having these activities that you do as a family is sort of a form of kind of mindfulness in my opinion. So I think these activities really help form memories for your family, and it really keeps that healthy bond in stressful times.
So Dr. Renteria, we've talked a lot tonight about their bodies and minds and all these different things. So, but what's the key kind of takeaway you want parents as they're watching this program? What's the key takeaway did you want regarding their child's mental health that you want parents to walk away? They don't think about anything else about their child's mental health. What's that one key takeaway that you want them to walk away with?
Just your child better than we do as professionals. And if your child is acting differently, their grades are suddenly dropped, they're isolating, they're not enjoying their activities that they once loved, that there must be something wrong. Mm-hmm. And to take them to a trained mental health professional or their pediatrician, and that mental health is health. So take it very seriously, because we're in uncharted territory, and unfortunately, depression and anxiety rates have increased.
Absolutely, unfortunately. So, Suzanne, last question for you before I think we had at least one good question coming from our audience, but last question for you is, what do you say to parents and teachers and other caregivers what do they need to do to help teach their children effective and proper coping skills, and to help them build that resilience that we know is necessary in today's climate?
Well, the most important thing is for them to share kindness and gratitude with the kids. It's very easy to say, no, that's not right, or this is wrong, or this is not how you do it, but share things that they do well. Give them kindness and gratitude. Helps alleviate depression. It helps alleviate anxiety, research has shown. And the most important thing of all is you are your child's role model, the teacher and the parent. And it's really up to you to show your child and your student how to be a good citizen.
That is some fantastic advice. So we have some questions. We're going to turn to just one or two questions from our Facebook audience as we're getting close to the end of our time here. But there was a question. This is probably for Dr. Soni, and I'm going to put it on screen here. From Tony Jones. He or she said, my grandson, 1 year old, just got over COVID. So you can see how young that child is. But he still has an on and off cough. Headed to the doctor. Can he get the vaccine even with that cough?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony, for that great question. I think a lot of parents have these questions now because we're in the midst of a surge. And so while they're trying to get their kids vaccinated, maybe they actually developed COVID. So it's really important to first understand that the vaccine is still important even after your child has recovered from COVID, because the immunity and the antibodies that you're going to protect your child with the vaccine are far better than just getting the infection itself. And so with a cough off and on, it's really dependent on how soon your grandson had COVID. And so the CDC recommends that, as long as it's been at least 10 days since onset of symptoms, it is okay to get the vaccine. But if the cough is still going on and off, I'm really happy to hear he's going to the doctor to kind of have the doctor take a listen and make sure there's nothing else brewing there. So a lot of times after the COVID virus, we do have kids that develop bacterial pneumonias and things like that. So in this case, it would be really important that we have his pediatrician take a look and listen. And then once it's deemed safe, he can get the vaccine, and it's totally fine to do that.
Thank you for that answer. A couple of rapid fires. I'm trying to sneak a couple underneath the time here. Dr. Renteria, we have a question. It says, she observed her 4-year-old child treating a classmate unkindly and was shocked, and she did nothing. Okay. I don't want to think that I'm raising a bully. How should I have intervened?
So if a 4-year-old is acting unkindly, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go on to be bullies, but it's good to kind of remediate the behavior, check in with them and ask them why they acted the way that they acted, and walk through the scenario with your 4-year-old. Why did you hit that little boy in line? And then figure out what the reason was. Why were they doing that? And then say, you know what, that wasn't kind. So what can we do better next time? So you can remediate their behavior.
Absolutely. And just quick follow-up, because I know there have been some questions about depression medications in children. What should parents know? Should they be concerned about depression medications, or should they just have that conversation with home base or the doctor that their child is seeing?
Yeah, many parents are concerned about putting their kids on medicine, and it's totally understandable. The good thing is that it's not just medicine that is a treatment for depression. Oftentimes, talk therapy can be very, very effective and is encouraged to be given in addition to medication. If your child psychiatrist chooses to put the child on a medicine, they're going to want some therapy as well. But medication is not the end all be all, and it's not always the case that the psychiatrist will choose medicine for your child. So just be open and have that discussion about the risks and the benefits, and therapy could be the first start.
Absolutely. That is fantastic. So thank you all for this wonderful, wonderful talk. We already getting some comments, great advice and tips. And so really looking forward to. So make sure I'm going to put the email and the link. I've already put the link to the Sharing Care in the comments. So like now that we're wrapping up, you can go click on that link and check out the resources you have available. I'm going to put the email address again here on screen. So for those people who can reach out to Sharing Care, if you want to be part of those monthly meetings, that is at sharingcare@cshs.org. Also, I want to let parents know that what we talked about here tonight should not be in replacement of. This is for informational purposes only. This is not to replace what the conversations that you are having with your healthcare provider, is not to replace a conversation that you're having with their primary care physician. If they're seeing a specialist, you need to have that conversation before any changes are made to their routine and their regimen if they are on some sort of plan. So just want to make sure that we recognize that. Now, as we're wrapping up this evening, I want to thank you so much. We want to thank our partners from Cedars-Sinai for this informative discussion. Thank you to Dr. Renteria, Dr. Soni, and Suzanne Silverstein from the Shared Care Program for joining us today. To all the parents, teachers, and caregivers out there counting the days until school starts, myself included, thank you for joining us for what we hope was a helpful and informative conversation. Remember to smell the roses and blow out the candle, and to get your children vaccinated against COVID-19 as we head back to school. And be sure to take a look at all of the resources that we've shared in the comments. If you joined us late, our videos will be available to rewatch shortly. We're going to re-air this, and it's going to be on our YouTube page. Again, thank you so much to Cedars-Sinai, from all of us here at blackdoctor.org and Daily Vitamina. Thank you again, and I wish you all a good evening.